Listen closely, because what I'm about to tell you is the kind of history that was never meant to survive. Imagine the sound of silence broken only by shallow breaths, your own breath, in a room that isn't truly yours. The fire is dying. The shadows grow longer. You are lying inches away from your entire family, your mother-in-law's wheezing cough rattles through the dark, your children stir in restless sleep, your father-in-law grumbles in dreams. And beside you, your partner reaches for you, but this is not intimacy as you know it. This is survival inside a cage of eyes, where every stolen touch could be witnessed, every whisper overheard, every act of desire twisted into shame by the church, by the village, by God himself. You were never told the truth about how couples in the Middle Ages lived, not because it was unimportant, but because the truth is too raw, too disturbing, too revealing of how deeply human instinct is chained and controlled. Privacy did not exist. Love, lust, intimacy, these were not private matters. They were collective events, hidden in plain sight, managed within the suffocating walls of a single-room home. And yet, within this prison, couples still found a way to carve out a world of their own. How? By inventing codes. By learning the art of silence. By living with the constant paradox of being fully exposed, yet desperately hidden. Understand this, intimacy, in those days, was not simply about desire, it was about defiance. To touch someone you loved in the presence of a watchful family, in the eyes of an institution that preached purity and obedience, was to resist an entire system designed to strip you of private will. Couples became masters of deception, a lingering look across the fire, a coded phrase about tending to animals, a sudden insistence on fetching water. Every gesture carried double meaning. Every excuse was a mask. The act itself became a ritual not only of flesh but of rebellion. But here lies the darker truth, even this rebellion was contained, anticipated, and controlled. The church dictated when, how, and why intimacy could occur. The architecture of the home itself, communal, suffocating, exposed, was a design of psychological control. And while you think you live differently today, you may find that the cage has only changed shape. Do not think for a moment that intimacy in these crowded homes was simply a matter of inconvenience. No, what you are seeing is the architecture of control. The medieval church was not only concerned with your soul, it was concerned with your body. It monitored when you could lie together, how often, and even which positions were sanctioned. Desire itself was branded as dangerous, a sin to be policed, a fire to be dimmed. And yet, the church did not build walls of stone to separate lovers, it built walls of shame, rules of guilt, structures of surveillance that turned every act into a confession. Imagine this, a priest declaring from the pulpit that you may not touch your wife on holy days, days that span nearly half the year. Imagine being told that your desire is only tolerated if it produces children, never pleasure. Imagine the humiliation of knowing that neighbors, servants, and family slept only feet away, ready to whisper, ready to judge, ready to remind you that even your love belonged not to you, but to them. Intimacy became a battlefield between private longing and public authority. But here is where the story sharpens to a blade's edge. The family unit itself became a surveillance machine. The father-in-law, holding his place of honor near the hearth, was not simply an old man needing warmth, he was the eye of tradition, the silent enforcer of unspoken rules. The unmarried brother by the door was not just a guardian against raiders, he was a guardian against shame, ensuring no secret moment slipped by unchecked. Every relative, every child, every guest in that one suffocating room became an extension of the institution. The walls did not need ears. The people inside the walls were the ears. And so, desire was not free, it was caged. Couples who dared to reach for one another were forced to live in paradox, silent rebellion under the roof of obedience. This, I tell you, is the psychological control no one teaches you about. They did not need to stop you with swords, they stopped you with eyes. They trained you to police yourself. And yet, somehow, in the darkest hours, couples still found ways. They discovered that love whispered in chains burns brighter than love left free. They learned to make secrecy itself an art form, and in doing so, planted the first seeds of resistance to total control. When everything you feel is forbidden, you adapt, or you break. Couples in the medieval world learned that if intimacy could not be lived openly, it must be concealed, encrypted like a secret message hidden in plain sight. What emerged was not just love in shadows, but a language, a code of survival, whispered from one generation to the next, mother to daughter, father to son. Picture this: a wife passes her husband a clay cup at the fire. Her fingers linger just long enough for him to know. A whispered question about whether the animals are secure in the barn is no question at all, it is an invitation. A shift of the blanket, a sudden cough, a candle snuffed out just too quickly, these were signals sharper than words. This was intimacy reduced to symbols, gestures, rituals designed to evade detection. And yet, those who understood the code felt something far greater than simple passion. They felt power. Understand me now, this secret knowledge was dangerous. To know how to signal desire under the gaze of your elders was to hold a weapon in a world of watchful eyes. To pass this knowledge down was to preserve rebellion under the cloak of obedience. It was not written in books. It was not taught by priests. It was carried in whispers, in looks, in subtle acts, indestructible, because it could not be erased. You cannot burn a look from a woman's eyes. You cannot silence a hand that brushes too long against another. But hidden within this truth is the deeper manipulation, those in power knew. The church, the lords, the elders, they were not blind to these codes. They allowed them, even relied upon them, because a man who thinks his secret life is his own does not realize it is still within the cage. They permitted you rebellion, as long as it was small, controlled, whispered. You believed you had found a way to slip the leash, but the leash was always there, tight enough to remind you of your limits. And here, listener, is the chilling part: do you think this game of control ended in the Middle Ages? Or do you see that the same system survives today, only hidden behind new walls, new eyes, new rules? You may have your privacy, your locked doors, your separate bedrooms. But every message you send, every movement you make, every desire you reveal, do you not feel the eyes? You must understand, what happened in those suffocating cottages was not merely about love or survival. It was a rehearsal. A prototype. A living experiment in control that echoes into the modern world. They taught entire generations to desire under watch, to whisper instead of shout, to submit even in rebellion. They made you believe your moments of intimacy were your own, when in truth, they belonged to the system that allowed them to exist. Think of the power in this. If you can control when and how people touch, you control not just their bodies, but their very spirit. You break the wildness of instinct and replace it with a rhythm of obedience. The church perfected this art. The family enforced it. And society thrived on it. You see, institutions have never been content with ruling your actions. Their hunger is far greater, they seek to rule your inner world. To program what you crave, when you crave it, and to make you feel guilt for the fire that makes you human. This is the secret most men never grasp: control is never only about force. Force is crude. True control is psychological. It is the whisper that makes you second-guess your own hunger. It is the shame that makes you kneel before your watcher before you even act. It is the invisible leash, the unseen cage. And once this leash is placed on your desire, it extends to every other part of your life, your ambition, your voice, your freedom. Now, pause. Look at yourself today. Do you really believe you are free? Your walls may be higher, your doors may be locked, but the cage is digital now. Every message read, every search recorded, every click observed. You still live under eyes. You still perform in a room filled with witnesses. The ancient cottage has only expanded into a global theater, and every man is still being watched. Here is the test: halfway through our descent, I ask you to prove you are not asleep. Comment these words twice, exactly: eyes cannot chain me. Write it not for me, but for yourself. Lock it into your mind. This is your symbolic rebellion against the cage. The act of writing it twice is the first crack in the walls around you. Because after this moment, what I reveal will change how you see intimacy, power, and control forever. You were told that intimacy is private. That it belongs to you and the one you love. But history whispers something darker. Intimacy was one of the oldest weapons of power. In medieval cottages, peasants learned to steal moments under the gaze of their kin. But in castles, in monasteries, in royal courts, intimacy was currency, manipulated, arranged, forbidden, or commanded for reasons far greater than desire. Every child conceived under a roof was not simply a child. It was an heir. A potential laborer. A future tax. Bloodlines were not accidents, they were strategies. Kings married for alliances, not for love. Daughters were traded like chess pieces to secure land, to secure peace, to secure loyalty. Even among peasants, the pressure to reproduce was not romantic, it was survival. More sons meant more hands for the fields. More daughters meant more chances at dowries, more threads in the web of obligation. The bed was not a sanctuary. It was a battlefield of economics and power. And above all, the church stood watch. With one hand, it forbade desire. With the other, it demanded fertility. To lie with your partner without intent of children was sin. To withhold intimacy from your spouse was sin. Desire itself was made into a tool of obedience, turned against you until your love was no longer yours. What you thought was passion became production. What you thought was freedom became servitude to the system. Even whispers of secret intimacy outside these sanctioned rules carried deadly risks. Adultery could destroy not just reputations, but entire family structures. Illegitimate children threatened inheritance, property, lineage. Kings silenced mistresses, nobles locked away daughters, priests preached damnation, and yet, in the shadows, forbidden union still bloomed. Why? Because desire, no matter how bound, cannot be killed. It only mutates, growing sharper in the dark, like a blade honed in silence. But here is the truth no one dares to tell you. Intimacy was never only about closeness. It was about power. To control who you touched was to control the very destiny of families, kingdoms, dynasties. The act itself was stripped of innocence, turned into an invisible chain that bound not just two bodies, but generations. And I ask you now, do you see the same pattern today? That even in your private moments, forces greater than you are still shaping, still molding, still deciding who you can be, who you can love, and who you will become. Suppression always creates pressure. And pressure, when it cannot be released, seeks other paths. What began as stolen touches under a blanket or whispered signals in the fields evolved into something far more dangerous, the birth of secret worlds. Desire, when forbidden, transforms. It hardens into hunger. It sharpens into will. And men who were told their very instincts were sinful began to seek power in the shadows, beyond the watch of priest and family. You must understand, every system of control breeds its own resistance. When intimacy was denied or restricted, it did not disappear, it drove people underground. Taverns became meeting places not only for ale but for hidden arrangements. Forests, caves, abandoned barns, these became sanctuaries where rules dissolved. There, away from the suffocating eyes, men and women carved out forbidden freedoms, each act of defiance a strike against the institutions that caged them. But something else happened. Men learned that secrecy itself could be power. They saw how the church controlled desire by cloaking it in ritual and shame. And so they began to form rituals of their own. Secret gestures, hidden oaths, clandestine brotherhoods. What began as coded signals between husband and wife echoed into larger codes of silence among men, societies built on secrecy, rebellion, and the hunger for power denied in the open world. Do you see it? The very act of suppressing intimacy created the blueprint for secret orders. Hidden fraternities that exchanged forbidden knowledge, guarded symbols, and swore oaths stronger than law. Men who had been taught to fear their own desire turned that energy into something else, organization. The same whisper passed between lovers in a crowded cottage became the whisper passed in candlelit halls, binding men in brotherhoods that defied the institutions above them. And this is why history hides these truths. Because what you are hearing now is not about cottages or castles, it is about transformation. How the deepest instincts of man, when denied, do not vanish, they evolve. They become fire. They become conspiracy. They become power. Even today, in your world of screens and silence, the pattern repeats. What is forbidden does not die, it only moves underground. And every underground current, no matter how small, has the potential to carve valleys into stone. The question is this: do you feel that current in yourself? The whisper that says you were not born to obey, but to create, to lead, to resist. This is where the mask falls. Where the story of crowded cottages, watchful eyes, and forbidden touches is revealed for what it truly is, not just history, but the blueprint of power. Because the truth, my friend, is that intimacy has never belonged to you. It has always been claimed by forces above you, shaped, manipulated, and used as a chain to bind your will. In the medieval world, your body was not yours, it belonged to the church, to your family, to the rhythm of survival. Desire was regulated, restricted, punished. But do not think for a second that you escaped. Today, the same game continues, only hidden under new masks. Now it is algorithms that measure your desires. Corporations track your hunger. Institutions shape what you crave, who you love, what you pursue. They do not need to sleep 3 feet away from you to watch you, they have built digital walls that see further, judge faster, and bind tighter than any father-in-law by the hearth ever could. And yet, the same seed of rebellion that lived in the whispered glance of a medieval wife still lives in you. The same fire that built secret codes, brotherhoods, and forbidden rituals burns beneath your skin. This is why they fear you learning these truths. Because once you see the cage, you can no longer pretend you are free. Once you hear the whisper of rebellion, you cannot silence it. And once you understand that every act of intimacy, every choice of who you love, what you desire, how you live, is a declaration of independence, then the chains begin to crack. History was never about straw beds and crowded rooms. It was about teaching you obedience. But now, as you hear this, you stand at a crossroads. Will you remain another man in the system, policed by unseen eyes, ashamed of your own fire? Or will you reclaim what was stolen, your desire, your freedom, your hidden power? Remember the phrase you wrote earlier, eyes cannot chain me. Say it again, now, but this time, mean it. Speak it with the weight of centuries behind you. Speak it as the oath of a man who refuses to be broken. Because intimacy was never just about love, it was about power. And power, once taken back, changes everything. The question is not whether they are watching. The question is, will you rise anyway?